The bliss of the abyss, it's here now.
Hello and welcome back to the Bliss of the Abyss. My name is Robert Neumark Jones. Thanks for joining me on today's show. My guest this week is Joe Murphy. Joe Murphy is an award-winning comedian and actor, Roast Battle UK finalist 2022, second place Global MVP Roast Battler, BBC New Act of the Year finalist in 2016, and a bunch of other awards. He is a touring stand-up comedian and all-round interesting good egg. And in this couple of hours, we talk about all sorts of things, obviously touching upon comedy, but also neurodivergency, survival horror. What are you buying? What are you selling? His time being Nicole Kidman's PA. We talk quite a lot about phrenology, if that kind of thing interests you. So stick around because it's a really entertaining show this week. What's new with me? I am going to be heading off to Thailand for a couple of weeks. So no new episodes for a couple of weeks. But then when I'm back, I have recorded one of the funniest episodes on this podcast feed's history. It is the perhaps final Not Fit for Human Consumption episode with Tom and Peter, one of whom now lives in Australia, the other in Bristol, both so incomprehensibly far away that I assume I shall never see them again. What else can I tell you? Thanks to everyone who came to the amazing Thanksgiving citizenship party. You know who you all are. I love you very much. You're wonderful. You're welcome every and any time. Apart from that, I just did a job for UNICEF, so I must be a good person. Anything else? I don't think so. I won't waste any more time. It's quite a long show today anyway, but there's tons of interesting, exciting and funny things crammed into the next couple of hours. Joe is a real mensch and really funny, and he's a good impressionist as well, so stick around for a very interesting, funny, enlightening, wonderful, vivacious chat between me and Joe Murphy. There we go. So, Joe Murphy, welcome to the Bliss of the Abyss.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Oh, it's my pleasure, honestly. We know quite a few shared contacts from the world of comedy, but I don't think we've ever had the pleasure of gigging together. More's the pity. But I have seen some of your clips online in preparation for meeting you. Some very funny stuff. I was just watching one of you at Hot Water Comedy Club. For my American listeners who don't know, very good club up in Liverpool. And you have some absolutely hilarious lines. I'm not going to give them away on the podcast, obviously. My favourite one might be the one where you take off the hat, though. I think that might be my favourite one. You don't have to tell it, obviously. But do you know how we've entered each other's orbit? How has that happened?
Well, there's an archaic social media platform called Facebook.
Hold on, let me write this down. Face.
For our younger generations, before your TikTok and Instas, you have a newer one, but I'm not even aware of that. We used to use the Facebooks. Now, this is where old people go to talk and to ask things in the comment sections, like, when are you coming home this evening? Because there's no separation between a personal message and a public message. Now, we still use this because we're just nearing our golden years. So that's how I've corresponded with Robert, who's seen some of my quote-unquote content I've put up on the Facebooks, and that's how we've come to enter each other's orbit.
Yeah, that's right. And in each other's orbit, we shall circle for the next however long. You are welcome. In fact, you could even bed down on the couch if if the storm gets worse. You can. Do you want to stay? Do you want to marry me?
I'm not into bigamy.
Oh, I see. Right. Well, I'll see what I can. I'll talk to my wife and see if we can annul the whole thing, and then I assume that's what you mean. That's the subtext.
I'm a polyamorous boy. I'm not a bigamist girl.
But anyway, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I want to talk about anything you want to talk about. But one of the things I know you do want to talk about, because you requested it, is the phrenology head that's in front of you. So for those more scientifically minded people, you might not know what phrenology is, but it's a debunked science from, I believe, the Victorian era, where they had the idea that different parts of the brain were specific to different characteristic traits. Now, we've actually subsequently found out that there is some element of truth to this, but not in the incredibly specific way that they imagined it would be. So, for example, I can see that there is a tiny back left corner of the brain that is all to do with secretiveness. Now, I don't think science has quite managed to pin that down to there, but there's probably some elements of that are correct. Is that right?
Well, I feel if there was a certain part of the brain that you could sort of squeeze and get secrets out of, the NKVD and the Gestapo probably would just squeeze people like orange juice to get what they need out of them. So, as far as I'm concerned, I believe it's called physiognomy.
Physiognomy, yes, right.
That was the 19th century archaic term. One of my favourite books is Dracula. Great read. Bit racist when it comes to the Eastern Europeans, but strangely, there's a scene where Jonathan Harker, he's observing Count Dracula. It's all spooky. It's great, great crack, as Bram Stoker would say in his Irish accent. When he suddenly starts talking about Count Dracula's skull shape and how it pertains to the physiognomy of the age. Again, I've said that wrong. I probably don't have the part of my brain that has
It's
the vocabulary
been excised.
research, but and it does somewhat detract from the spooky atmosphere when just throws a bit of the old Darwinian racism in there, old Bram. As a fellow Irishman, I'm not amused. I'm not amused one bit there.
Yeah, it was a different time. Eugenics was all the rage, and it's making a swift comeback now. Are you born and bred? I'm by inheritance. They tried to take away my Europeanness, so I became Irish through my granny.
Stick into the euro. Get those double ass passports. Absolutely. Yeah, for me, I'm purely a first generation Irishman. So I sound like Margaret Thatcher when I gig up in the north, which does me no favors. Wish I had that Irish bouge, like a Colin Farrell, but alas, this is the Queen's tongue I speak with.
But maybe if, back to physiognomy and phrenology, maybe if you found the part of the brain that is to do with accents, and you just inject that with HGH or something, then the brogue will just blossom.
Well, I can do an Irish accent. I mean, the thing about the Irish accent is it's shite if you're Irish, but if you're American, you're like, oh my god, that's the best Irish accent I've ever heard.
Are you from Galway?
Are you from Galway? You have to come back to my farm in Winnerpeg. Oh my god, we've got a president. You've got a prime minister. How gay is that?
Sorry. So what parts, as you look at the phrenology head, and as we're going to relate this to real science, what parts do you think are comically inaccurate, but which parts also do you think look kind of correct as you understand it?
So the prefrontal cortex is the area of executive functioning. So basically organization, time awareness, how tasks pertain to other tasks in a sequence, and it's gotten that quite correct actually. So the skull, for all our people who don't listening who don't have magical powers, ostensibly in the front of the skull you have areas like order and calculation. I'm moving away from the microphone. Apologies if my voice is going faint. It's not because I'm being sucked down a wormhole. There's criticism, there's action, there's association, literary, observing, faculties, knowledge. So they have gotten that area right. That is more of the OCD-esque area of the brain where you're likely to make top bank as a Marcon's exec on 90k, but you're not going to be a bazillionaire because you don't have the you don't have that sort of love of risk that you kind of need to be a billionaire. Actually, truthfully, most billionaires either have ASD or ADHD. I'm not saying that a lot of famous, successful people don't have OCD. I mean, Hitler had OCD, and he did well until it went badly. When he actually took meth, his doctor gave him meth, which is terrible for OCD. So because what it does is it stimulates the prefrontal cortex, and if you already have OCD, then that's going to make you absolutely obsessed with control and order, which is what happened from 1943 to 1945. So he just went completely bonkers, he stopped delegating to all his generals, and he completely fucked up the war effort because he got the wrong medication. What he actually needed was 5-HTP, which would have relieved that pressure on his prefrontal cortex, would have increased serotonin and not dopamine. But, I mean, I'm not saying...
It's a good thing you weren't his doctor.
It's a good thing I was not Hitler's doctor. So that's... I think if there's one thing we can agree on this evening, it's that.
Yeah, that's very important. I knew we'd come to that within sort of 5 minutes of chatting. Yeah. The whole... I'm taking you've read Blitzed. The whole thing about Hitler being dosed up was really interesting because obviously the Nazis presented this whole thing of like clean living, like they wouldn't need any kind of supplementation because they were so perfect, Ubermensch. But actually they were dosed Pervitin. All the regular soldiers were on meth the whole time, and then Hitler had his own personal doctor who was a whack job, who was just injecting with all kinds of stuff, sometimes including I don't know how to pronounce this, Eucydol or something, which is like a kind of oxycodone. So whatever he was feeling, the doctor would be like, don't worry. And he kept a meticulous log of what he was giving him. So we know that Hitler was just dosed up to his eyeballs. And that's why he was given, and by the end, like some of his orders were like, burn the whole of Germany to the ground. And that will somehow make us win. Yeah. If only he'd have got some lovely 5-HTP.
Exactly, yeah. He would have...
killed us all.
He would burn the enemy's cities instead, which
it was always the plan, one way or another.
Much more logistical sense considering his, his annual review plan. So yeah, that's that's very true, and it's I suppose it really does speak volumes to the German war effort that that sweet meth. I actually do take a bit of meth, but. As I call it, Vyvanse or Ivance, either way, or Ivance, as it's pronounced in Elvish.
Oh, you speak Elvish, good.
I do.
I've heard of Vyvanse. This is an ADHD medication. Am I correct?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yes. Okay, I know this because there's someone on the internet who takes it. Is it similar to Ritalin? Or is it the other one?
No, it is similar to Ritalin.
So I've tried that.
Yeah, everyone I've spoken to who is an ADHD comedian, they absolutely love Vyvanse or Ritalin. So it does seem to be similar. I think they're both stimulants. Just to sort of it's a stimulant. So it's basically speed. Well, it's speed. It's It's basically speed meth cocaine. So what would happen if you didn't have ADHD and you took these medications? Is you would turn into Scarface. You'd be shooting an Uzi off your balcony with a big globe saying the world is mine. But if you have ADHD, ostensibly you become incredibly focused, articulate, and academic. Which makes parties very interesting. So there are lots of interesting effects that different drugs have on different, I wouldn't say mental health conditions, because mental health conditions I'd say are more akin to depression and anxiety, while I would say that these neurological disorders, I would say they're actually, I wouldn't describe them as mental health conditions because they are who you are. So they're nothing to be cured. But it's interesting. So I have a lot of fun friends who take a lot of fun supplements you can't get in Holland and Barrett. I myself am sober because I used to be a binge drinker, which would increase dopamine drastically, and I found out what I had was something called attentional bias, and that was that I could only focus on conversations if I was a bit drunk, especially if it was noisy, because that would really screw up my vagus nerve. So I've kind of had to use ChatGPT like a motherfucker to work out my brain, as well as conferring those notes with doctors who were like, yeah, ChatGPT be right. So yeah, but it's all very interesting. I think it just to sort of wrap up my point, as I do go off on a tangent, for some unknowable reason, is that certain drugs, like for instance
Oh.
Oof, that's the drug dealer who's
Oh,
come to
no.
deliver the drugs.
He's a bit late. Sorry, pause.
No, it's okay.
Girls are recording at home. Hello, mate.
Yeah. Oh, he's getting them.
Thank you.
Sounds like a good sale. Can't believe you can get that from Deliveroo now.
Your drugs, sir.
Fantastic.
Sorry, medication. Sorry, supplements.
Supplements, fantastic. No, yeah.
Sorry, carry on, as you were saying. Sorry,
No,
recording at home.
No, absolutely. So, yes, certain drugs seem to have different aspects. So, for instance, I've noticed that if you have ADHD, ketamine makes a person very relaxed and articulate. And also if you have low serotonin and dopamine levels. But if you have, say, a very high amount of serotonin and a very low amount of dopamine and vice versa, that's when these drugs can create these really like almost aggressive like reactions in people. So like someone who has ADHD and takes ketamine, really chill, really relaxed. Someone who has bipolar, that can be the opposite. Like they can get very angry. The one drug I've noticed that seems to be just a general equalizer. In rare instances, it does cause psychosis, but a general equalizer is weed. That's just the baseline. It seems to work, but the problem there is it's so easy to become addicted to it that I would always recommend to take CBD as more of a sort of you can get it in shops as easy and whatnot. But anyway, going off on one.
Yeah, well, now, gosh, lots to respond to there. That's really, really interesting. I didn't know about attentional bias. That's interesting. And then now, congratulations. How long have you been sober?
So 10 months, yeah.
10 months. Well, congratulations. As long as that works for you, keep it up. And the thing about Vyvanse I found really interesting because, I mean, I've never been diagnosed, so I'm not going to say if I do have it or not. But the times that I've tried Ritalin, I definitely didn't find that it sped me up or made me go a million miles an hour. So I don't know what that says about the way my brain works or doesn't work. I'd be interested to hear more. So are you newly on this medication? How long have you been on it?
Yeah, so I first started taking it in mid-September. So very, very new.
That is very new.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD at 37. I was diagnosed with dyspraxia in 1990, so I was just almost 3 years old. So it's just been a long process and now I've almost this week I've really come to the conclusion after speaking to so many people saying, so what are you exactly? Is it ASD, autistic spectrum disorder? Is it ADHD, attention deficit disorder, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder? Or is it dyspraxia, which is like a motor coordination disorder where you're a bit clumsy, or dyslexia where you can't read words? And I feel that for most people who are neurodivergent, it's everything, but you just have certain areas where you're more that basically. I haven't met a single neurodivergent person who I feel doesn't have at least somewhat a small amount of each. So I've just started describing myself as neurodivergent, not neurodiverse, because that's more. Everyone is neurodiverse because neurology is different from each other's. But I would say I'm neurodivergent, and I think because that for me I feel just is easier to describe. And there are so many like great artists and philosophers that seem to have a ballpark of all these different conditions that I feel it's easier just to say that I'm predominantly ADHD with dyspraxia, and I feel I have mild ASD with mild OCD. So that's where I am at.
And how long was the journey between you thinking, you know what, I think I might have this, to going to a doctor to getting prescribed? How long did that take you? What was that like?
So it was a long process because I tried to go through the NHS, and that was in early 2003. And it just took so long. And I just felt at the start of the year with what I would consider to be a form of alcoholism. I mean, I say a form. I mean, it is alcoholism. I don't want to sort of, differentiate, but I would say it was more under the umbrella term of alcoholism, because as soon as I start taking supplements to reduce my dopamine and serotonin, which very basic supplements you can get, like saffron and I think L-tyrosine, which increases dopamine, I just didn't feel the compulsion to drink. at all, and that was in the first few weeks. And you know, I gig every night, so I'm always around alcohol. So if I couldn't do it, if I couldn't be around alcohol, I just couldn't. So I really did find in my particular instance where I was, and I think Kit Harington, who's also was recently diagnosed with inattentive ADHD, when he was in rehab, and a lot of people I've spoken to who went to rehab and got these diagnoses have found that they immediately, when they were under the right medications or supplements, that impulse to drink just dissipated because they could focus on conversation again without having to use stimulants to have that source of dopamine so they can concentrate. But yeah, it's very a lot of this is coming out like very like soon. Like I don't think I would have been like this. I wouldn't have had this journey even a year ago, because all the research is coming out almost monthly at this point. So it's you know, it's I feel like I might be somewhat you know, upset that I was diagnosed at 37, but equally I feel that this is the only time I could have gone through this journey.
And it sounds like now might be a quote-unquote good time to get this diagnosis if we're learning so much and the pool is expanding so rapidly right now. Then it seems like, you know, it's the reverse of when people are taking a brand new experimental drug and there's kind of no literature on it and they're just like, well, I hope it works. It seems to work. And 5 years down the line, it's like there are these terrible, terrible side effects. But with something like the ADHD medication, it's been around long enough. It's gone through enough of those trials. They're pretty sure it's well tolerated and seems to, as long as you sort of have the right dosage. I don't know if titrate is the word, but that's the one that came to mind. You have the right dosage spaced out in the right amount of time. It doesn't seem to sort of like make your brain explode.
Yeah, there are certainly risks though. Like it can cause psychosis, cardiac arrest, suicidal thoughts, and death. So there's there's a little bit,
just a couple of small risks,
a few hiccups. So I really want to just emphasize that before I feel like I'm the merchant from Resident Evil 4 who's welcome, buy some wonderful ADHD medication.
The hooded guy.
Yeah.
What was the thing he would say? Was it welcome? There was another thing as well. What you buying?
Combat anytime.
What you're selling?
What you're selling? I think he seemed a lot more interested in what he was selling.
Yeah.
Because he could sell it at an enormous markup. Yeah. It was great voice acting. It was also who played the same voice as Leon Kennedy. So. That's
really?
Some excellent range there. I can't remember the actor's name. But
you've got to take notes. That's good to know. I'll do a bit of voiceover myself. I'm going to look up this. I loved Leon. I would always play as Leon, I have to admit it. Leon Kennedy's voice actor, voiced by, well, two different people. Nick Apostolide, that's in the remakes and in the film. Now, this is going to be or Toshiyuki Morikawa, possibly. Well, what I'll do is I'll cut that and I'll drop in the exactly correct words, and it'll look like I just knew off the top of my head when you bring it up.
Well, that is the miracle of editing.
Of cheating.
Yes.
But with the side effects, would that not be the case of like either a bad reaction? You know, people have smoked a cigarette and had a crazy bad reaction, so those exist to any substance, or taking too much. If you just take the regular dose, that you're not going to suddenly drop down dead, are you?
No. So you have to have a cardiovascular test, and also it's important for them to check through your NHS records. So there is a real process there, because stimulant medication will increase your blood pressure and heart rate. If you have any underlying heart conditions, it's quite risky. So they might prescribe medication that isn't a stimulant, because stimulant medication will increase your heart rate. So there are physiological risks, and with the neurological risks, and I actually this happened to me last week. So I had a really good reaction to the Vyvanse, which is what they prescribe and is successful in 80% of cases. So it is the medication they subscribe, but the prescribe. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
It's a new subscription model the NHS is trying.
Yeah.
For just £4 a month.
It's the TikTok NHS. Prescribe. And because I spent so much of my life not doing anything about being neurodivergent, not going to cognitive behavioral therapy or taking any sort of supplementation for it, I actually feel that I had very low dopamine and serotonin levels at the start of the year. So, and for a long time, I actually lost my ability to smell. I was.
This is before COVID. You're the OG.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. Everyone else was like, I can't smell. And I'm like, wow. Yeah, no, well, I mean, it's probably a good thing for people around me because I am a stinky pig. Yeah, I could finally make friends. Actually, I did meet my my last girlfriend in COVID, so that probably explains a thing or two.
There we go.
You know, just she couldn't smell those terrible pheromones. So back to the point.
Yes.
A podcast where you disappear down a tangent beggars belief. But because when I started taking the Vyvanse, which started on 15 milligrams first week, then that went up to 30. Everything felt pretty good, but I did feel I was getting quite annoyed and impatient with people in a way I hadn't before. And I mentioned this to my doctor, and he prescribed me 40 milligrams of Vyvanse because I said I still kind of have problems with concentration in conversation. And that week, woo, that was not good. I was just irate. I was ostensibly Dostoevsky. There's no other word to describe it. I was writing heavy prose. I was talking about existentialist philosophy. I was. But like it's all true.
It sounds good.
But it was.
It's no place for a man to live.
I wrote 5 chapters of a book about how the will to live is based on spite, and used the analogy of a wolf caught in a bear-like trap and gnawing its own paw off to survive. And I spoke about the survival instinct, and I emailed. Oxford University to do a speech. I got an acting agent, and because I just phoned up so often, I was in this absolutely obsessive, high maintenance, ultra high productivity. I now have an acting agent because of this. Well, so I'm going like, my brain is like, it's almost like a cross between Limitless and Silver Linings Playbook. But then I saw a friend, and I was just shite. I was just not listening. I was just talking at them, and they just said, something's wrong. Something is very, very, very wrong. So the next day, I took half the medication of Vyvanse, and I started to increase serotonin using 5-HTP, and I had rhodesia, ashwagandha, and CBD to reduce the stress. And then suddenly I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is it. Okay, so that, because what had happened, because I had initially such low levels of dopamine and serotonin that when I just increased the dopamine, which is in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that has aspects like order and control and organization and communication, I hadn't the back of my brain that had every aspect of like sympathy and compassion and hope and joy and all the and if you have low levels of serotonin, you don't have you just are like, you're more irritable and you're more angry. That I just became this just like rage monster of organization. So interestingly, yeah, when I took the serotonin, I started to feel like myself again, just a heightened version of myself. But I really, really would recommend to illustrate to your doctor, if you do feel you have ADHD, that you might have somewhat OCD-like compulsions. Because what happened to me, and I'm smart enough. Well, I wouldn't even say smart, because I feel that sort of denotes that there are certain people who are smart. I think everyone's smart. I really do. I think everyone because smart isn't knowledge. It's intuition. That's what smart is. That's what makes a person intelligent. And everyone I've spoken to has very good intuition. I don't know many people who don't. They know what's good for themselves, even if their intentions always make sense, even if their actions do not. But what I would say is, I recognized that my recurring intrusive thoughts were not good, and they were not what I would typically associate with thoughts that I have. They were very pessimistic and dark, and because I was able to realize that I was having intrusive OCD, almost, or anxiety disorder like thoughts repeatedly over and over again, that something had gone wrong with the medication. So last Sunday I had that change around, was able to note this and get a correct prescription, but it was quite scary. So I think with any of these processes, I think it's just, in the first few months, don't continue as if life is normal. You are taking medication, life-changing life-changing medication, and it's really important that you just keep a track record of all your behaviors and don't measure yourself to the same standards that you usually do, because a lot of those standards are based in shame anyway, because you would have a lot of shame, because it's the only way that you regulate yourself if you have lower dopamine and serotonin is with shame and cortisol, because it's the free component chemicals in the brain. Is like there's four actually. There's norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, and cortisol. And if you don't have the first three, you will self-regulate with cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So that shame is the only way you know how to exist. So, in conclusion, just be very careful. Yeah.
The bliss of the abyss.
Well, I think sometimes that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing all of that. When you're trying a new thing, whether it be recreationally or even prescriptionally, you're not going to know exactly what the right amount of anything is straight away. Same with alcohol, right? Some people can have a drink and be fine. Some people can have 10 and be fine. I wouldn't recommend it. But you kind of have to tiptoe up to the line, and then I think you have to kind of go over the other side of the line to realise exactly where that line is. And it sounds like that's what you did. You went over the line. Your doctor encouraged you over that line, shuffled you over. Then suddenly you're ranting and raving at your mate, and you get a reality check. Hold on a second, I'm going mad here. And then you kind of ease back. You supplement with something else, and you find, hold on, now we're here. Now I'm in sync. And I mean, it took 37 years to get there, but some people never even get there, right?
Yeah. I think there are things that I'm grateful for getting a diagnosis later in life, because you do learn. You have to develop a personality completely self-sufficient personality that can exist in the world, that can survive relationships in the workplace. And what I found is when I speak to people with ADHD, to be honest, usually guys who were little shits as kids, because those are the ones who get diagnosed with ADHD. I made a meme once, which was the sort of meme template is there's a little girl and she's in a swimming pool and she's being lifted up by this really doting parent, and she's smiling. And then there's this boy who looks like he's absolutely drowning, and then below that there's like just a skeleton at the bottom of the swimming pool. And I made a meme which was the girl being praised was boys who were little shits getting diagnosed with ADHD earlier on, and then the drowning boy was boys who were well behaved getting diagnosed later in life, and the skeleton at the bottom of the pool was women with ADHD, because women do not get diagnosed with ADHD or ASD. It's because all this it's just caricatures. That's all it is. It's that you if you have ADHD and ASD, you are the little shit, the little boy who's a shit, or if you have ASD, you're Rain Man. And even doctors think this is the case, and it's so misunderstood that there are so many women who are dying of stress and anxiety and depression. They're in these terrible toxic relationships with men, and they can't communicate anything. And the reason that, honestly, no one notices is because agreeability in women is socially enforced.
Yeah.
A woman who is smiling and nodding and saying yes, yeah, because she's being inattentive and she's just masking that with agreeability. We as a society think that's a good thing. That's it. And then these women, they die of stress.
Yeah. I wonder what can be done about that. I mean, there's not enough differences between men and women to think that it would be like so common in men and so absent in women. And there's a medical bias, isn't there? I mean, this has been known for ages, because I remember this is even, well, it's not trivial, but it's sort of not exactly the same thing, but the early seatbelts were really badly designed it would injure women a lot more, because all the crash test dummies they were using were all a male body. And it's like, well, it works very well for men, and then women are getting more beat up because it's just that default bias. And they had to, act on that and change that. And with something like physical, like a crash test dummy, I suppose that's a bit more trivially easy to solve. With something that's like a bias, an unconscious bias, a systemic unconscious bias, rooting out the problem, identifying the problem is like step one, rooting out, changing it. It seems an almost impossible task, but an essential one. So hopefully it sounds like, I don't know, I'm not at the forefront of this. Sounds like maybe there's some change in the air with this, or am I being optimistic?
I think that's a really good analogy. And speaking of change in the air, most offices are the temperature is actually specifically tailored towards men and a man's body temperature, which so women have a different body temperature to men, and this is to do with having a different kind of thyroid. So women typically will have underactive thyroids, men will have overactive thyroids, but women feel temperature differently to men, and all all temperature in offices is the set default is for a man's temperature. This is why you get women in the office, they're freezing, and the men don't notice at all. And I think the way women get men back now, I mean, this is just a joke, is just because women can tolerate cold water more than men, based on having certain more fatty tissues. And,
right.
Not that women are larger, but they have sort of
a higher percentage of body fat.
Yeah, because of for pregnancies.
Yeah.
But truthfully, yeah, it's these problems are so specific that it's almost hilarious to bring them up as actual like systemic problems, but they actually are when you look at them. Like this is why I think comedy is so important, because you have comedians like Joe Brand who go up there and they just say things. And it's all a laugh, but no. I mean, she's talking about things which are real, and they're real problems that sociologists and psychologists are trying to tackle. So I think it's a really good platform to sort of just slightly worm your way into people's understanding in a way that you couldn't if you just started offloading all this neurology and all this wanky southernist university Margaret Thatcher bollocks at them. So comedy is it's a really good form to get underneath people.
Yeah, because people can put their guard down if they're laughing, and then you've got an opportunity to actually talk to them.
Yeah.
And academic language can make people put their guard up for understandable reasons. And then there's also, and this is related to medicine as well, of course. There's the bedside manner of a comedian and of an academic, right? There's a reason that certain people become like popular scientists or public intellectuals. It isn't because they're the most intelligent, it's because they're the best at conveying the ideas that probably other people in their field have come up with. It's rare that it's like the person at the forefront of the research is also the public intellectual giving the public talk. It's like, actually, my colleagues are the brilliant ones doing this, but I can talk like this and make a joke and all the rest of it. And I think that's part of the reason why comedians, when they get like really big, often fall into this dumb trap of like, you can't say anything anymore, and people are so offended because people have listened to them for so long, and they've pointed out these interesting things about society for so long, that when they get so big and they point things out, they get more pushback because they're bigger. And they think that means you can't say anything anymore. And it's actually, but you're saying you're cancelled, but you're on a sold-out global tour and you're filming a special for Netflix. So something doesn't add up. You'd hope that cognitive dissonance would ring a bell somewhere in their consciousness.
Oh yeah, I mean, I fall down the rabbit hole of Ricky Gervais.
Oh God.
It's not even like, I mean, I actually have more sympathy for Dave Chappelle, because at least Dave Chappelle, like with his whole I'd say his critique of the discussion around the trans debate, like
which one of his 10 specials on the subject?
I at least understand that he is upset that his very good friend was pressured into committing suicide by their community, and and that's like a real authentic place, and I at least have respect for that, but I think with Ricky Gervais, I just find it I don't know what happened, but like if it was just Steve Merchant leaving him as a writing buddy or whatever, but he's just writing is just plummeted, because it's nothing you could. I do dark comedy. I do roast battles like every week. I think I used to be voted the second best roast battler in the world, and I am no stranger to dark comedy. But he is saying absolutely nothing of value that you couldn't find in a YouTube comment or on 4chan. There's nothing he's contributing. It's boring. That's the worst thing I find about a lot of these. But the actual, I think the whole debate around cancellation, it's a lot more to do with social media preferences than it is to anything else. And I've said this to people, and I sound like a weirdo, but I'm going to just state it. So left-leaning people prefer to read their content, and right-leaning people prefer to watch their content. YouTube is growing a left-leaning, more left-leaning content creators,
Sure.
but
it leans right.
It leans right. It's had a history of leaning right. That's most of the views, and men typically lean more to the right. Women typically lean more to the left. But that's not to say many. I've got friends who are very,
sure.
And I sort of, as someone who I'd say considered as ballparking around the sort of left-ish, centre-ish, I don't know, but I feel like I have friends from a lot of different political spectrums that sometimes I do find, But anyway, the point of the matter is that what happens, I think, with stand-up is that people on the left who spend a lot of their time reading essays and going on Twitter before it was eaten by the Antichrist, they see words, and they associate like strong meanings with those words. So, and when they see a stand-up clip or they see a stand-up, they almost lose the ability to notice like tone and body language and how important that is to communicate irony and sarcasm. They just see the words in and of themselves, and that's why they strongly react to it. But to say that that's something the left-leaning people, they're more emotional, or they're like more easily triggered than the right is absolutely just wrong, because every fucking video on YouTube is some right-wing reaction video. Some celebrity will say something innocuous, and you'll just get bombarded with just like
the
your feed
comments
will just be
unbelievable.
Everyone just commenting and just how upset and offended they are, and it's so boring.
Yeah. I know. And a lot of the time, I don't know, maybe this might be just more coming from comedy. A lot of the time people are offended, like, you weren't polite enough, or you said a swear or something like that. And it's like, don't be offended by that. Be offended by, like, what did they mean something harmful? Were they promoting a hateful idea? Were they trying to destroy a group? Was it something like that? Or were they making a joke? Were they poking fun at something? Like, and they happen to say fuck, and it's like, well, and you said the word, so I'm no longer going to listen to you. And I think that's sometimes as well, people think when they can't say anything anymore, it's like, well, I can't say this word anymore. It's like, why do you want to say that word? Just out of curiosity. And it's like, just so I want to. It's like, okay, all right, that's interesting. That's it's one way of thinking about how the world works. But there's saying the word, and there's receiving the word, and then there's reading the word, which is not the same thing. And I love your point about and it's obviously not 100%, but I think I probably generally agree that those to the left might be more likely to read their content, and those right watch their content. I think there's different games you can play with both of those, aren't there? There's different ways to smuggle in subtext and meaning. And if you read the transcript of a video, then you can take away a wildly different meaning than if you, what's the equivalent? I can't do it the other way. You read a transcript of video, or you make a video of a piece of text. That doesn't work. I've talked myself into a rabbit hole.
Well, you can use AI to summarize a YouTube video, and then you can use AI to make a really fucking weird animated version of an essay.
There we go. You've helped me. Thank you. That's what we should do.
Yeah. I should have Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal created into AI, where it's just some terrifying looking Englishman with huge broken teeth eating Irish babies. What I find about dark comedy is, and this might be a quite strong thesis statement, is people who are bad at dark comedy are bad at fucking. And it's just in my experience, if I was a Jordan Peterson, as you will, I would notice there's such a strong correlation there between bad fucking and bad comedy, because dark comedy, you have to have such good intuition for what people want and audiences' preferences. You go to an audience, and if you're a good comedian, you're always tackling and fighting against the most alpha looking guy in the room, trying to take away their power, because everyone in the room loves that. And then you address the relationship dynamics between the woman and the man that she's brought, whether it's a boyfriend or a friend. But you're tackling that dynamic and you're looking into the relationship, and you're typically trying to uncover, I mean, you know, not that all comedy's based on this, but some kind of cognitive dissonance or some sort of power dynamic in their relationship that makes the woman very happy and makes that man very sad, and then suddenly you've won the room. But the point is, with dark comedy, you have to have such intuition and a good reading of people, because people on the right specifically, like, I mean, not to generalize too much, because I know there's some fucking great female comedians on the right, but they think women don't like dark comedy, and nothing could be further from the truth. Women love dark comedy. They fucking hate bad dark comedy, because I think typically women have a stronger intuition than men do. I think that's both nature and nurture. I think they primarily nurture, because women have to have a strong intuition about men, because their survival depends on it.
Yeah.
But because of that, they really like good dark comedy. I perform roast battle every month. It used to be weekly, and majority of the audience are women, and they love that shit. They love that shit. They are just cheering. They are cheering so much, because what they really like is just seeing someone who's like, all right, he gets it. And you know, I did a strip roast battle a few weeks ago with my friend.
A what?
A strip roast battle where you have to take your clothes off if you get the joke wrong.
Uh-oh.
It was the full Monty. The women loved it. It was riotous. It was Bill Murray Comedy Club. It was absolute pandemonium.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that if you want to get better at dark comedy, start small and scale up, as Peter Jones from the Dragon's Den might say. Don't just jump into it and start saying, "Oh, I've seen Dave Chappelle, and he did all these really dark jokes, so I'm going to go up on stage and just say all these things about the trans debate that I have absolutely no understanding of, because I'm going to get some shock laughs." You'll just make everyone's arsehole tense up.
Oh my God.
No one will laugh. Everyone will just wait for you to get off stage. You just have to just ease into it with experience, because dark comedy is the hardest genre to pull off effectively.
But the most rewarding if you do. Those laughs, if you get them, they're the juiciest, sweetest fruit of all. But yeah, the amount of times, God, when I used to host an open mic in Finsbury Park, and then, well, a few other places anyway. But this was the one time, the amount of times we'd have this one guy who'd turn up, and oh, bless him, I don't know what was wrong with him, but he was not good at comedy, and he was new. And he'd go up there, and he'd just basically start by offending someone in a very kind of cack-handed way. And, you know, you can do that if you're doing it as a piece of stagecraft, and then show that was actually, oh, that wasn't really me. That was like a character I was being. But that really was him. And so very quickly the audience, like you say, the intuition, especially in a group, they can sniff it out immediately, and they're like, oh, this guy's a wanker. And he's not going to get any laughs unless he fucks up, and then we're going to laugh at him. And then it creates a very strange atmosphere in the room, because they're not cheering him on at all, but like not rooting for him either. They're just like, this piece of shit. I can't wait for him to not even finish his 5 minutes.
Yeah, it does happen to us all, that does. And in that situation, what you just mentioned about they would be laughing at him, that would actually be a really good tactic to get people back on his side, because what you would do is get people to laugh at you, right? And then play into that, but not in a way that's defeatist or makes them feel a bit uncomfortable. Just play into the "you're smarter than I am" dynamic, and just hand the audience that authority. And once you've kind of almost apologized, but not actually saying "I'm sorry," because that's weird, but you've almost conceded defeat, you can slowly win them back again by tailoring your material accordingly. And I think this is why it's with comedy, a lot of people, all right, I'm going to have my 5 minutes and I'm going to stick to it like a routine. You have to have that flexibility just to sort of slightly tailor the jokes and win people back. Because if you can win back a room that hates you, that is the greatest feeling, and you just end it with a big applause. Like, that is peak comedy.
I know. And the ultimate move would be being able to finish on that first thing that you clanged with, somehow bringing it back and making it actually good at the end. Ooh, we're talking Holy Grail stuff. That's tricky stuff.
The cherry on top of the cake.
Yeah, the 5 minutes thing is interesting because I'd have some people who'd come and they'd work on their craft and they'd obviously kind of like pay attention to like, oh, that worked when I did it that way, and come back and try it a new way, and then you'd have some people who'd come back and they would just do the exact same routine every time, and it was like they were trying to get something out of themselves, but it didn't matter what reaction they got back from it. It was very strange to witness because I sort of thought, well, why are you doing this? What's the compulsion to come up and do the same thing? It's the definition of insanity, isn't it? And expecting different results.
I have quite a lot of neurodivergent comedian friends, and because I think it's the majority of comedians. Yeah. I really think it's just, people there's such a social stigma around mental health that most people aren't willing to admit that they're neurodivergent, but most comedians are, because they are seeking that dopamine hit that they don't naturally have. And what I've noticed is that a lot of comedians who primarily have autistic ASD, they like their routines. They like to stick to their routines, and they're very, very good at their routines. And they're just seeking that sort of perfection of that routine to move on to the next, and almost like, so they have that routine, then they'll do it in competitions and they'll do a bigger gigs, and they can sort of, that's the way they work their advancement. And that's why they might do the same routine over and over again, just to sort of get the kinks perfect, while people who predominantly have ADHD and with small amounts of ASD, they'll just enjoy the sort of experience of just being there, and they'll be very flexible, and it will be very audience focused and very improv focused, but they'll probably forget to film it because and they'll never do it again, and even if it's great, they'll forget. And then you have people who lean more towards OCD, and I would say they're very, very good at emceeing, and they're very good at running a night, and they're very ordered and structured, and they just know how to just keep the night from falling into chaos. But they somewhat struggle with nights where they don't have that control, because they prefer like an ordered environment that they're in control of. So they struggle sometimes. To have that freedom that people with ADHD have, but equally people with ADHD struggle, and they wish they had that OCD level of organization and control. And autistic people kind of somewhat in the middle, really, and they kind of, again, the major difference between all these neurological disorders is just the level of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin a person has in their brain, and as well as how their brain is hardwired. So it's not all just chemical levels, but we're all ostensibly the same. It's just, and we can as I've mentioned last week, I felt I was a lot more OCD when I had lower serotonin, higher dopamine than I do this week. So it's all relative.
I was. I wish people could have seen that. I was told by a mental health professional that what I'm constantly seeking is some kind of like control over the GABA in my brain. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I've heard of GABA. It's Yabba Gabba Doo.
You bastard.
I've
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah. Old, have some Yabba Gabba Doo.
Oh, Fred, you shouldn't be recommending, Fred, all these neurological supplements.
Oh, party old pal, it's the Stone Age. We don't know about mental health. It's one of those terms that I'm aware of in the brain that, it's one of those feel-good chemicals. It's the amount of times I've just gone on healthline.com and seen what foods and supplements increase what.
Yeah.
And try to sort of balance it all out. But what was your experience there, Robert, with the GABA?
Well, what he said was it was what I was constantly seeking to do would either be open the floodgates of GABA or build the dam, and that ultimately that was unsustainable, and I'd be seeking that either in behavior, like thrill-seeking behavior, or substance. Alcohol's very good for that. and benzodiazepines are good for that as well. So it's kind of easy to be like, well, I just take the substance and then that does it, which sounds like a similar thing you were doing to alcohol, not to speak for you, but from what you said earlier. And then that's part of the reason I think that I like thrill-seeking behavior as well, because that's what it does, is it binds to the GABA receptors and your body just pumps and goes more. But then you get overwhelmed and fatigued, and then that's when you kind of like start to be like punch drunk, because your body is like run at 150% for too long.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that, actually, because I've spoken to quite a few people who've been on the ADHD medication for years, and they've said their attention shifted from chasing excitement to seeking peace. So they went from being party animals, constantly going out, constantly having fun, to just a good day is just one where they just read and quiet, they just do a bit of tidying up, and then that's a good day. And that's because of those kind of different chemicals in the brain. That's what they find joy in. But it feels like that whole chasing excitement, it's very like 20s energy. That's very finding yourself, and it's almost, it's almost fun. Like it's you kind of want to have 20s that are exciting, and you make kind of loads of mistakes and whatnot, because you will get to a stage in your life where routine and organisation is more important than chasing that high. Equally, though, there are limits, and I have friends who are in really bad situations at the moment. Really bad. I mean, not they do drugs, because I think my opinion on people taking drugs has changed a lot, and I think, considering the absolute hell that is the state of the NHS after austerity, 2008. I mean, unfortunately, the war in Ukraine, while incredibly noble of the government, has still contributed to the economic crisis we have. There's a cat underneath.
You don't mind
table.
cats, do you?
I love cats.
Oh, good. This is Stevie.
What do we want? More balls of string. When do we want it? Meow. Yes, the cat is on. She's here to talk about her autobiography. It's part of a 9-part book deal. Get it there? Classic cat pun.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Did you just come up with that now, or is that some material?
I came up with it right. Meow. Will join us after these breaks. Actually, I did want to say, Robert. Would there be a point in this podcast where we could, speaking of dopamine and chasing an exciting energy, where we can have a little bit of coffee? I suppose we could keep it running and then just come back. And
you want to keep it? We can pause.
Yeah.
You are listening to Bliss of the Abyss. Ooh, yeah.
We're back from our little coffee break. Robert asked where we were, and we couldn't remember, which I feel is on brand considering the topic we're discussing.
Which is?
Neurology and neurodiversity.
I don't remember this.
Yeah, no, it was some way back in the olden times. We were on the Titanic. I was on the deck, and you were holding me up, and so I could pretend I was flying.
Who painted who?
Well, I think you painted me, but one with a really cartoonishly large head. I mean, I have a very large head, but it was akin to something you might find at the London dungeons. But it was the most erotic experience of my life.
Well, you have an ample bosom, sir, and I wanted to, pay homage to that. Mm-hmm. Why didn't she let him on the raft?
Well, if she had more ample bosoms, maybe he'd have something to hold on to, a bit of Beyoncé, or as Beyoncé, as it's referred to in the UK.
Is it really? I didn't know that was the technical term.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for informing me. Now, question. The phrenology head, back to the phrenology head quickly. Is there anything on there that is just laughably inaccurate that you can see?
As this was made to justify racism, I imagine I'm going to find quite a few things. It's like the Where's Wally of hate.
And of course he must turn to the back of the skull, where the secrets are kept in the dark rooms of the mind.
Yes, of course, friendship would be at the back of the head. Very Victorian.
Friendship, what's that? Distant memory of it, somewhere back there.
No, I only have my wife, who I have a very cold relationship with. She's not my girlfriend. No one is my friend. There are only subjects and enemies of the crown. I hope you. Yeah, it's all justice.
Justice.
As if justice is something quantifiable. Justice is an illusion. I'm not even joking. Like, justice is it's imagination. There's no such thing as justice.
It's an abstract noun.
It's an abstract thought. Well, you can't.
Absolutely.
How could you possibly compare justice to something like organisation? That's two very different. What is this bullshit?
Oh no! It's all falling apart.
It's no. Everything here is, and faith. It's tying faith. Faith is also something indivisible and quantifiable.
Faith.
As someone who studied theology, I find this most reprehensible, Robert.
Well, I'm so sorry. We shall smash it and do some kind of rain dance around it. Maybe that will make things better.
The Christ God will be appeased.
But you can have faith in justice, right? Like, the idea that these would be separate parts of the brain doesn't logically even compute. Like, you can lose faith in justice. Does that mean, like, one part of the brain goes? Or does that mean both of them have gone?
Well, not according to this. They're in the same square.
Oh, they're in the same quadrant.
This is literally putting people into boxes. This is everything wrong with the world.
No, people have been out of boxes too long. It's time to go back to boxes. You know how fashion is cyclical? It's time for us to go back in the box now.
What is that, 2020, is that?
Yep.
Not anytime soon. For me.
You're allowed out for 1 hour a day to go jogging. That's it.
So safe the state. I loved that Boris Johnson was so eager to become the Brexit Prime Minister and became the sad face of putting on a mask for 4 years until he just lost all passion for politics and just became a drooling, wet sock of a man.
It is the sweetest justice because he didn't get to do his fucking Churchill tribute act for like more than 10 minutes before there was a massive pandemic. And I just...
We will wear them on the beaches. We will wear them on the landing strip. Wherever we go, we will put on our masks.
We will double up on the tube during peak season.
We will always make sure we put on bacteria-killing lotion when we shake hands 2 meters apart. We will never surrender our freedom, except for all the time I'm requesting you to do.
We will wipe down our Amazon packages. Oh man, I had to fly during the early days of COVID for sad reasons, but it was one of the most bizarre experiences of my life because the disease was very new. There was basically no international travel allowed. We didn't really know what the fuck was up, but we knew if we got sick when we got there, we wouldn't be able to go to this funeral. So we were wearing gloves, double masks, the face visor. Do you remember the face visor? Like, that was going to work.
Like Dexter when he's about to kill someone on his table.
Exactly. In case someone splattered some Corona. But the weirdest thing, I still cannot go over this experience to this day. And people on this podcast will have heard me tell some version of this story before because it's so bizarre. We're at the airport, social distancing and everything. Finally got through and they were checking people at the gate. And there was this guy and he had this box, say about 4 foot tall. And it had these yellow hazmat stickers taped around it. I swear to God it said human remains. And I swear to God, he was saying with the woman, please, I have to get on. And she was saying, you can't. And I was just walking past, so I didn't hear really any more than that snippet. And to this day, I want to know, what was his story? How did he get that far with the box if he wasn't allowed on? What was in the box? Why wasn't she just letting him on? But maybe it's good.
Well, what was the airline? Because that could explain a lot. Because if it's...
That will be the confounding factor.
If it's BA, that's a strange story. But if it's Ryanair, that would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, sorry, we can't allow you on simply because we already have 5 human remain boxes on board. There's just no room for any more.
I mean, say what you will about Ryanair, considering how cheap they are. I mean, they could basically just fucking jetten you like in a fucking like catapult to like France. And if you just reached there, like that would still be value for money. Like you know, I mean, it's typically the human remains come out of the aircraft rather than go into it. But you know, I think I was speaking to some American girls last week. Oh, kink!
Oh.
But they said, we're part of an airline that are, you know, this is like comparable to Ryanair. And I said, no, it's fucking not. Don't do yourself a disservice. I know one thing about America. You do have very tight security, which is somewhat authoritarian, but your airlines are not to the same standard as Ryanair's. They are the Weatherspoons of the air. Good value, but you're not bringing anyone on your birthday.
We all know what we're doing when we're there. We all know we've underpaid. And at any minute, they could come up to our backpack and say, actually, we've just changed the rules. It turns out you owe us £15. And you'd be like, well, fair enough. It's still cheaper than any other way I could to get to my destination.
Exactly.
You bastards.
Exactly. The stink of human remains is still preferable to that £200 hike with BA.
Oh, my God. Yeah, it was a wild time. Did you travel at all during COVID?
Nope.
No, you made the right decision.
No, I just I had a whimsical romance, and it was good, and I just enjoyed mulling around Epping Forest, chatting shop with someone who I am not together with, but I would still consider to be one of the most intelligent people, if not the most intelligent person I've ever spoken to. But that ship has sailed, to quote James Cameron, and now
You were in love with the ship?
Yeah, no.
It's the most intelligent person you ever met.
Yeah, big old boats. I mean, you know, the bit when the boat crashed into an iceberg wasn't very intelligent, but that was only because the boat was in the middle of a tangent.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the boat's fault. That was the captain and the iceberg. That's the big conspiracy.
Well, you never get into a throuple. I heard the captain was on Fields at the time, and that was. Have you heard of Fields?
Fields?
Fields. It's a dating app for kink.
Oh, I don't know the apps. Tell me the apps.
So you've got your Tinder, which is what the old people know. You've got your Hinge, which most people agree is like the kind of vanilla source of dating, which is fine.
I know Bumble. That's the female-led one.
Although that's slowly changing now because it's not really working out in anyone's favour. And then there's Fields, which is just the grinder for straight people. That's the only way I can describe it.
They finally cracked the code. They've made a grinder for straight people.
No, they have not.
I see.
Women are different to men.
Yes. This was always going to be the problem.
Yes. You see, it's a simple phenomenon. Men will basically, you know, and I say this from someone who knows a lot of gay people and bisexual men.
Yeah.
That men have to assess a person less than a woman does.
Right.
And it's for the simple reason that men are aggressive fuck monsters.
Good timing. You say you've been reading a lot of academic journals. I assume this is where you're pulling this material from.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's classic Schopenhauer.
So
who actually did hate women. I mean, it kind of...
That was his kink.
Yeah, it probably was, to be fair.
So how does the kink app work? Do you just like, hey, I'm really into rubber and ball play, and then you swipe until someone else who is also into that, and then heaven is a place on earth?
Yeah, she might be into flubber, and you've just got to do a bit of negotiation.
Right. Of course,
you know,
yeah.
Bouncing off the walls like Robin Williams with ADHD, which I think he has in that film. It makes sense conducive to his character arc. Yeah, it hasn't been very good for me. You see, I'd like to think I'm a free-thinking guy, but that Catholic guilt does worm its way into your brain somewhat. But you know, I'm trying to currently work out whether I'm actually also bisexual because I've never kissed a man. I've never had those thoughts, but I have noticed a huge. And this is how everyone writes their academic papers. They start with "I noticed." That's what they say. That's how Einstein wrote Theory of Relativity.
Oh, did you ever notice?
I noticed. I noticed that time is relative. Have you noticed this? You know, E equals I noticed. I noticed, right, that a lot of neurodivergent people are also queer. It seems very seems similar, and I do think there's a real neurological component to it. So
There's a Venn diagram overlap.
it really does feel that way. I mean, gender dysphoria is now being frequently discussed as a neurodivergence, because so the theory, as it goes, just talk about the trans debate. Just throw that in there for the views.
Sure.
Hashtag that. That in the womb, when we're all being developed, and we all get all these kind of, I wouldn't even describe them as disorders, because most of the great thinkers of the world were neurodivergent. I'm sorry, but they were. Gender dysphoria, ostensibly, it's very similar to phantom limb syndrome, where a person will lose a limb, but they can still feel that limb because the neurological receptors that are still connected to that limb. And with someone with gender dysphoria, they have the neurological receptors to the sexual organs of the opposite sex, so that creates that dysphoria. And there are many instances of, I've known a few people personally who've just recognised, wait a second, I think I might have gender dysphoria, I think I might be trans. And lo and behold, when they've had physical examinations, they've had ovaries or testicles. So it's real.
Unbeknownst to them.
Yeah,
It's like, you actually have these things. And they're like, what? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really? Wow, how interesting.
Yeah. So it's absolutely, and they just knew it inherently, in the same way people just know that they're gay or they know that they're bi or whatever. So what I'm quite interested in, because considering every neurodivergent person I know is queer, and that I'm just trying to work that out at the moment. I'm not experimenting or anything like that. I mean, who knows, maybe. But
why are you taking your top off, Joe?
Oh, Roberto. Oh, mamma mia. Your wife's upstairs, is she? We'll have to be quiet. Let's turn down these podcast mics.
Turns
that
them up.
Barry-litis, candleitis. Goodness. Wingardium Leviosa. That's the Viagra.
It is. You ever tried that?
What, Viagra?
Yeah.
I nibbed a bit. I just gave it a little nib. Seemed to have psychosomatic effects, but
Did you say you gave it a little nib? With a
just
straight face?
Well, it's very expensive, so you've got to make do with the ones you have. I think it's like 15 quid for two now. I'm not made of money. I'm just a struggling comedian. But it's nice to have it just in case. I think to be honest, women listening in the audience, most men do have a few lying around just in case, especially if they have been drinking. I mean, these, for my drinking days, they're just there still. So
Yeah.
it's a
real thing.
Always good to talk to women that you are taking it, because don't want to give.
Well, no, absolutely. They should know if you're on some stuff. Do you think some women have that kink? Back to the kink app.
What, Viagra King?
Yeah.
No. no woman
No,
would want
you
that.
idiot.
No. There's subs, there's doms, there's all kinds of freaky deaky stuff. All I can say is that my dyspraxia does not make me. Let's just say it doesn't make me a savant at rope tying.
No, right.
It is the shoelaces of sexual proclivities. This is why I put ADHD on my fields profile, just to let them know.
Yeah.
Vyvanse does make you horny.
Does it?
It does. It does. It's something I'm very cognizant of, because I am in a position of authority and I don't want to. Yes, it's one of those things. Sadly. That I feel that we're going down this tangent now. This is where I'm going, but
Good.
I feel that the comedy industry has a very, very bad track record of older men preying on younger women.
Yes.
I would say,
And sometimes younger men.
and sometimes younger men, as the old Kevin Spacey at the old Shakespeare's Globe at the theatre he used to own.
The RSC. No, sorry, the Young Vic. Sorry.
Oh, Young Vic, that's the
Young
one.
Vic.
Young Vic,
Sorry.
yes.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, with his sticky hands.
Yes,
and his-
legally found Not guilty, just to be clear.
Well, he did make that hilarious Christmas video. That
God, wasn't that weird?
It certainly cleared everyone's...
Well, this looks like someone who's not guilty.
He's... No, of
Hear
course.
him out.
Look at him. Look at his terrifying eyes.
He's playing a Bond villain from that show.
Yeah, look how he looks at the floor, and he slowly looks up, and his eyes just slowly follow like an Anthony Hopkins-esque Hannibal Lecter. Yes. Actually, Anthony Hopkins is autistic, and he's one of the greatest men I know. I used to work at Shepperton Studios, and I got to meet lots of celebrities, and a lot of them are autistic. Interestingly, God, the tangent.
He's presumably out about this.
Let's
You're not dropping breaking news here.
Let's talk about the bad comedy people.
Yeah.
No one specifically.
Okay.
Because I signed a few NDAs. Didn't really.
Yeah, the Predators.
I think.
But I want to hear about the celebs as well. And
the celebs is the good stuff.
Let's start with the bad stuff.
Let's start with the bad stuff, and we'll move on to the good stuff.
Sounds good.
The good stuff.
/bad.
The bad stuff is historically. I mean, I think Baby Reindeer covered it pretty well if you've seen that show. But
love that show.
And I think it's good that you brought up that preying on young men as well. That there is this sort of idea of the man with the cigar who will help you out. He will say, "You're a great kid. You got the chutzpah." And especially if you've got low self-esteem, that's really going to appeal to you. And then they just prey on you sexually. I've seen this. I've known victims and perpetrators of this. I'm very loath to recommend certain gigs now. And what I think the sort of the almost I've noticed just the sort of psychological syndrome that a lot of these men have is that they think because they have good values that they're good and they don't have to work on themselves, and it's not a daily struggle to be good and to recognize and to check yourself and to think about your there's this quote that's you measure yourself by your intentions and other people by their actions, which is pretty much explains all human behavior. And what a lot of these, I'd say, men do is that they think now that they've got the good values, that's it, they've stopped, they're no longer in a state of becoming, they're in a state of being. And because they're at that point of feeling good about themselves, because they probably also have bad self-esteem, they don't check to see if their impulses, so they'll book with these young female comedians and then just try it on with them because they're not one of the bad guys. Obviously there have been a lot of public outings recently with men who are like this, and to be fair, truthfully, I would say that this hasn't happened to me, but it's not something I would say is a million miles of something I could do, and I feel that's just really being completely honest. That compulsion is just in every man. Every man just wants to basically pass on their seed, really, and it's not to sound too grim about it, because I do have somewhat of a Dostoevskian view of the world. That men need to stop thinking of themselves as good. They need to think of themselves as always trying to be good.
Right. Because once you think of yourself as good, then you're cocooned from thinking too much about the consequences of your bad actions, because you think, well, that was an aberration because I essentially am good. That was a bad thing. Maybe they don't even have that amount of realization. I don't know. I
think it's exactly that. Like it's almost like what BoJack Horseman was also arguing. There's me. There's that all that bad stuff was a different me. And then all the good stuff is a different me. But it's I think what it ultimately boils down to is about like focusing less on other people and yourself, and just it's almost like saying to yourself, it's more important to understand yourself than it is to have other people understand you, because if you can understand yourself, you'll understand your motives more, you'll understand your compulsions more. And if you understand where you're coming from and how you think and feel, you're less likely to make mistakes that are based on actual ill intent, because you are aware of your factors and you will stay away from those environments and you will be very much more self-aware. And it's both that. So a lot of, I think, more religious writers actually write about this than sometimes secular writers. I think Ralph Waldo Emerson is a great writer, and he's a transcendentalist author from the American 19th century. He spoke extensively about self-reliance, and the need to be in tune with yourself and your inner genius and your intuition, and just to have that drive. And I think that philosophical framework is important to instill in people. And while I'm almost being too sympathetic to the predators in this, because I'm almost saying, you know, I'm like, this whole speech is almost like to say just to these like predatory men, just stop and think. And I think to an extent I'm trying to save people who aren't worth saving in a way. That's but I think as a man I can only really just speak to other men, because you can't understand anyone else. You can only understand other people intellectually. You can never understand other people emotionally. But I suppose you can recognize those kind of qualities in yourself more than you can other people who are so different to you. There's more of an intellectual gap. But at the end of the day, just to sort of preface this, to be a victim of predatory behavior is so awful, and I have been a victim of predatory behavior before, so I know what it's like, and I do have certain triggers, but I still do dark comedy, and it's a really difficult thing to quantify, because you can be intellectual about it, but to emotionally process it are two very different things. But what I would say is, I'm very, very, very glad there's a debate going on within comedy, within all these publications like Chortle, and within the wider comedy community about this, because it's really, really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yes, and all the fun stuff about celebrities.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, we'll get to the fun stuff about celebrities. Let's wrap up the grim stuff first, because we're purposely not naming any names here, because that's not the point of what we're saying. I mean, apart from Kevin Spacey, unlucky Kevin. It's not like all of this isn't public information, and the stuff that isn't public information we can't say because it's not public information. It's not been verified. But yeah, definitely, if you're a new comic and you're starting out on the scene, talk to other comedians and find out about other nights and see what the deal is, because there are people who run these nights who are pieces of work, and they will take advantage, and you do hear horrible stories. And hopefully, eventually the truth will out and people do get outed, and you do, I mean, it seems like every couple of months there's some new horrible person who's been exposed in the comedy industry. It happens in other industries too. I guess the comedy industry also likes to gossip quite a lot. So when it does come out, it kind of bounces around the world a million times as well.
Yeah, well, that's actually a low dopamine, the reason, I know it sounds quite harsh to say this, but people with low dopamine or serotonin, they gossip more because they're kind of closer to being depressed. They really want to people please. They really want other people to like them because they don't like themselves. So when they have information, they'll just go and tell people because that will make them more likable. And
is that so?
Yeah, and then they're sort of like so in comedy, make friends with people, like, because you will. Yeah. And also, romantically, if you do find people that you click with, I think everyone has a relation. Like every single person who's in comedy long enough, you will have a comedy relationship. You will. And it will also go badly. And it's just inevitable. So just make sure you end it on the best possible terms you can, because it's inevitable. Anyway, that's all I'd say about that.
Well, I think that's good. That's wraps up the bad. Let's go to the good. So you said you used to work at, was it Shepperton?
Yes, I used to work at Shepperton Studios. So I used to be Nicole Kidman's PA.
No way.
Yeah, she was great. Great crack. It's so funny when she broke up with Tom Cruise, because I've got a friend who used to be his PA, and she loves him, and obviously I really like Nicole Kidman. And what was really interesting is after their divorce, there's just this picture of like Nicole Kidman just looking so fucking happy because he's got ADHD, and like other celebrities, Johnny Depp, Will Smith, so great. Ryan Gosling, like there's, Ryan Gosling is like a fucking sweetheart, like but it's it's almost like American actors, because they're they follow the Stanislavski method acting, and with people with ADHD, they're not quite have these difficulties with empathy. A lot of American actors have ADHD, and a lot of British actors and Australian actors, they have ASD. Anyway. So just to sort of relate, I think she found Tom Cruise to be fucking exhausting because she's just this like normal Aussie. She's like, for fuck's sake, Tom, stop talking about the Scientology. She's like, I gotta talk about the Scientology. I gotta talk about it. We gotta make the world a better place. And she's like, for fuck's sake, I just had a long day at fucking Shepherd Studios. I just want to chill. Yeah, no, go off on one. So she's a great crack. Judi Dench's great crack. Pretty convinced Daniel Day-Lewis is ASD.
That would sort of line up.
Yeah, and like because his characters, like his sort of relentless masking in his performances would suit that. And we let's just say we both had the same physiology. We both carried ourselves quite similarly, and maybe that's a form of projection. Ooh, maybe I'm just like my favorite hero. Who knows? But it feels likely. And most celebrities there are great crack. Fergie, lovely from the Black Eyed Peas.
What? Okay, look, you've got to tell me like one story. You're just dropping name after name after name. You've got to tell me a story with one of them, or with multi of them. So then I turned to Tom, and he said to Will, I mean, what are we talking
He said,
here?
you've got to get drunk on the ADHD medication. It'll go well. You'll have a great time at the Oscars. That's why he did it, by the way. He was drinking. You're not supposed to drink when you take the ADHD medication because it increases dopamine more and it can cause you to be aggressive. No one ever.
That's why he smacked Chris Rock.
He did. That's exactly why he did it. Like, and then like, obviously, Jada Pinkett Smith, is it her name?
Yes.
Like, yeah, she's more OCD inclined. So like, yeah. The fucking thing is though, as someone with ADHD, I'm a fucking nightmare, right? I am a fucking handful. I forget shit all the time. Just terrible at organisation. I'm not a great boyfriend. Like I try and I strive and I plan and I do all these things, but I am not a great fucking boyfriend because I just can't help myself to just have these impulsivities, right? So I have to really like check and think and plan and work on myself all the time. It's exhausting, but it's important to stay in healthy relationships and trust in people. But I think Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, he's got ADHD. He's self-medicating with all these drugs. She's OCD. She's also they're both queer. Like most of these celebrities are queer. I think like their relationship was terrible, but I actually feel a bit sorry for Amber Heard because despite everything, it was a toxic relationship, and I feel people just, it's almost like oh god, I was going to talk about nice things, but like it almost feels
we were there for a few minutes.
Yeah, it almost feels that men with ADHD get the sort of like more loving, commendable, or let's like, they're just a bit of a, they're like a dog, they're like these dogs, and they just like to bark and love, and they're so full of love. But that love is a dependency. It's a neediness in that, And all these like women who have OCD are more like cat-like, because they like order and they like to be petted on their own terms and stuff like that. And I'm saying this. I do recognize. I'm not saying that Amber Heard and the way she acted, it was fucking dreadful. It was psychosis. That said, I don't feel that like giving Johnny Depp this huge these are toxic relationships. Yeah. They don't bring out the best in either. Amber Heard has had loads of great relationships with women because they have that more compatibility, and I feel like it's almost like the fucking internet is predominantly all these like angry like right-leaning men who just hate women, and that's the reason that she got this fucking like absolutely crucified. And I like Johnny Depp. I do. He's fun, and I think he's ASD as well. Tim Burton's autistic ASD. They're both click. If you've ever seen an interview, they're looking at the ground, they're just mumbling like classic autism. Like, and I just want to sort of say that like just to sort of crucify women is that's what it is. It's crucifying women because it's easier to do so, because it's easier to hate a cat than it is a dog.
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting the conclusion.
Right.
Wow, okay. I think it is easier to hate a cat than a dog. Yeah. I think it's also easier to forgive a cat than a dog. I don't know why. I think you sort of think with a cat, if it's a shithead to you, think, well, it's a cat.
Well, yeah, and like cats don't like bite your hand off. And
No, unless they're big enough, in which case they definitely do.
No, yeah.
Where you feel like if a dog's bad, you feel sort of like, I don't know, I sort of feel like dogs are born good, cats are born neutral. And I think dogs can be made really bad, but cats can't be molded one way or another. And when a cat really wants to be nice to you, it really wants to be nice to you because it wants to be nice. When a dog wants to be nice, it's because you trained it to want to be nice. And it just wants to be nice because I want to be nice, I want to be nice. When it wants to be bad, it's because you trained it to want to be bad. I want to be bad, I want to be bad, I want to be bad.
Well, cats actually share more DNA with us than any other mammal. Well, I mean, apart from obviously chimps
the grey apes,
chimps,
yeah.
But so dogs share 80% of our DNA. Cats share 90% of our DNA, and they have a greater emotional sensitivity to dogs. Dogs can be quite exhausting because their love is genuine, but it's dependent.
Yes.
While a cat will read your body language
Yeah.
and will nuzzle up to you when it recognizes that you need to be nuzzled up with. A cat has a greater emotional intelligence than a dog, and I feel the analogy is somewhat condescending, and by somewhat I mean very condescending to say women are more like cats and men are like dogs, but it does create an image which I think is based in real neurology there, that you can see, like, I think when relationships fall apart, you can sort of say about the woman, like, oh God, she was such a bitch, you know, because he was throwing all this love at her and he was buying her all these presents and he was, but you know, that's dependency and that's not respecting boundaries. And a cat doesn't like to be stroked when it's, you know, doesn't recognize the hand that's stroking it. And that's just, you know, cat will like to be stroked on its own terms.
Yeah.
I don't think and the reason people don't like cats is because people don't like themselves. It's just what it is.
Right, whereas a dog will come in, it will accept love from any old body. As long as you're ready to go.
Yeah, and then people are like, wow, look, this submissive, trained creature that... I mean, Hitler loved dogs. No wonder why. You know, I'm more trustworthy of people who like cats because I think they have a greater understanding of the human condition.
Did you meet him at Shepperton?
Mr. Cat.
Mr. Hitler.
Oh, Mr. Hitler. No, unfortunately not. He was on a film shoot in Argentina.
Argentina at the time, was he?
Yeah.
So what were you doing? What were you doing at Shepperton? What was the job? What was the gig? And how long did you do it for?
I was a runner, a typical runner.
A runner.
And I certainly was.
And you didn't fancy going up the ladder?
I couldn't do it because I couldn't remember to do it.
Right.
Story of my life, having ADHD, forget to capitalise on your successes.
Yeah.
You're quick to capitalise on your misfortunes.
Is
Just
that
very
so?
bad at remembering to chase up. And also there's an element of awkwardness, you know, you can't really be authentic. Someone offers you something like, I don't really want to talk to them again because, you know, like, I don't want to just be like fake and just ask them and just say, you know, can I have another job because that's really inauthentic. So you're obsessed with authenticity because you are authentic and you don't want to put on a mask. Because, you know, I think the idea that people, you know, who are autistic have lower empathy is just... It's just not correct. It's a different kind of empathy. It's sometimes a deeper understanding of emotion than people who are neurotypical. I think that's to bring us back to a more optimistic. So Sir Anthony Hopkins said that his autism helps him understand people at a deeper level because he feels he's neurologically different to neurotypical people. He can almost see them almost like a sober person observing a drunk person, where he's more able to kind of mimic and not emotionally, but just he can mimic their behavior, almost like an impersonation. And same with Daniel Day-Lewis. So I think if you watch Anthony Hopkins' performance as Hannibal Lecter again, and think of this as someone who's a hyper-intelligent autistic person. And you'll understand how that performance is different to, say, Brian Cox's interpretation of Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter, or I don't know the more recent performances. But for instance, in the TV show Mads Mikkelsen, that's more like a satanic interpretation. But Anthony Hopkins' portrayal is as an autistic person, and watch his lines and how he delivers them, and his understanding of people at a very deep level. And also think of Daniel Day-Lewis playing Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood, and how he talks about hating people, but he also really knows how to manipulate people because he can put on this showmanship that's also it's almost like he's describing someone who's autistic, and that sort of way that he understands people. Tilda Swinton, I think I would say very strongly would say that she is also autistic. She could, I read extensively, and she talks about not being able to speak until the age of 5. That's classic. That's classic autism. There, you speak later in life. But to describe it, because you have in certain areas of your brain, like for instance, if smaller executive functioning, you have a larger hippocampus, which is what this physiognomy here. This is trying to highlight in its Dickensian manner. You have a larger hippocampus, so that you do have a larger memory core. You have a greater capacity for creativity. So really, I think ultimately what I'd like to express to people who are neurodivergent is that it's not this curse. It is a blessing. And there's a great analogy. I can't remember her name, but she's one of the predominant authors on neurodiversity at Oxford University, and she speaks about, or they speak about, so I don't know the pronouns,
right.
But I would, and I don't care if it seems woke and cringe. I think it's important. But she says, "Fuck it." They say, "I'll get there eventually. We'll get." I'm a 37-year-old man. They say you're in a car, and you're being neurodivergent is like a car that's super fast and has the brakes of a bicycle. And if you can learn how to slow the brakes down, you have a much faster car.
Right. I like that analogy. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to see. I'll look up who that author is afterwards. I'll do some research on that. I've not heard that before, but that completely makes sense. I think it's really it's a really interesting time to be like coming into your own understanding of this, because it sounds like we're about the same age, and it's like you said, in your 20s you want to have this and this and this and go out and be excited and exciting. And then when you get to kind of our stage in life, it's not about that anymore. It does become more introspective. It does become more, ouch, fucking front door attacked me. Sorry. It does become a little bit calmer, even if you're busy, but a little bit more thoughtful, maybe reflective. You hope. Some people our age, of course, are not like that at all, and you sort of think, well, that's a bit of a shame, a bit of a waste. But if you are more that way inclined, and then you start to discover something profound and important about yourself that actually it seems like you've kind of felt was there for quite a long time, then that is even more of a blessing, because you have more ability and scope and time to understand and explore it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. When is a door not a door? When it's trying to attack you. To respond to your point, yeah, it's exciting. It is exciting to be able to think about these things more objectively than you would as a child when you're experiencing everything subjectively, and to be able to be academic about your own brain, I think is really exciting, and it's exciting to write about. It's exciting to talk about. I completely agree with you. So, I mean, would you say, Robert, that there are things I've spoken about that you can somewhat relate to?
Yes, definitely. But I'm wary of the street corner analysis, armchair psychologist of it. People have said some of these things about me. I've been diagnosed with depression before, and I'm an insomniac, but I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but a lot of people have kind of said that. But, what's that? They're not doctors, so they don't know. But the times I have tried the medicine, I have noticed that it works well with me. But I don't know.
Well, all I can say is that it's really important to be a medical professional before you start whoring your wares off like the merchant from Resident Evil 4. However...
What are you selling?
All I can say, stranger, is if you have insomnia, you might have to have some 5-HTP, which increases serotonin, because that will give you a really good night's sleep.
Yeah.
Would you also like an Uzi with that 5-HTP?
I'm going to need it.
Come back any time.
Maybe that's what the fucking last Plagas is, isn't it? It's just fucking... rhodiola or ashwagandha. They're all just high off their tits on fucking Holland and Parrot supplements.
Maybe that's why I liked Resident Evil and Silent Hill and stuff, because you never get a good night's sleep in that. You literally, any second someone lies down to rest, something's going to burst through the door and try and kill you.
And also in the first Silent Hill, they're all addicted to a drug. If you remember that game quite well, sort of subtext there is all what caused whatever caused it was Dr. Kaufman. He brought in all these drugs and sort of infected people, but it's because it's a game that's more based in feeling than fact. It's all implicit. Unlike your baseline basic Resident Evil lore.
Too basic. Did you ever play The Evil Within?
I did.
What do you think?
Yeah, same director as what's his name, Murakami. Was it?
We'll drop it in. It'll
Edit
be
in the
perfect.
post. Yeah. So yeah, I did. I enjoyed it. I think it did really feel like a sort of hodgepodge of Resident Evil, Silent Hill. I don't know entirely if that worked, but I enjoyed it. Yeah, I think it feels like Alan Wake has sort of achieved that slightly better.
Now that was a time that I did take some ketamine, and quite a lot actually, which was a bad idea because we were up very late. And we were playing Alan Wake because I was living in a terrible, real shithole in Finsbury Park. A young man full of dreams and ketamine apparently. And Alan Wake did become the real world, which I wouldn't recommend because it's a terrifying world. And what I think those games are so good at doing is they slowly warp from like you're walking along into like something is turning and everything just like the colours tilt, the camera goes a bit squiffy and it's, I don't know, it becomes like a nightmare, right? It like elongates into a nightmare. And that's what happened to my life. I wouldn't recommend it, kids. It was only for an evening.
Yeah, I think like I first played Silent Hill in 1999, a bit of an old fogey, and I've been playing survival horror since 1991 when I bought Alone in the Dark. Well, I bought, my parents didn't. I like a 4-year-old didn't walk in and say, "Can I have the scary game, please, sir? Can I have some more survival horror?" More. But most people I know who are, I wouldn't say depressed. Melancholic.
Okay. Yeah, back to the Dickensian.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being melancholic.
Right.
Don't fight against it. That's just who you are. You know. It's just. Sure. It's just who you are. The more you accept it, the more happy.
You'll ironically.
Melancholy. It'll be like Lars von Trier if he was less insufferable. But. Yes, those games, Alan Wake, Silent Hill, and then there are a few others, Forbidden Siren, they really do capture depression so well. There's nothing quite like it, and it really just, it feels, I mean, with the Silent Hill 2 remake that's just been released by Team Blooper, small Polish development team that fought against Konami to make a game good, which speaks volumes to the Polish cultural tenacity. But yeah, they've included facets to the game that have actually increased its emotionality and new endings that feel like they should have been in the original. And I feel there's a real resurgence right now of survival horror.
Because of The Last of Us, right? That's like made the genre mainstream again. Like Resident Evil took it mainstream, but then they ruined it by turning it into action movies that stunk. And then it's been bubbling along, but then The Last of Us comes along and actually becomes actually a good TV show, which is actually a mega hit, which actually has lots of people now paying attention to what used to be a bit of a niche, nerdy genre. Which is my favourite.
Yeah, I actually don't think you can make a bad survival horror film because they're either so bad they're hilarious or they're actually good. Like Silent Hill Revelation, which is the second Silent Hill film they made, is one of the funniest films I've ever watched.
I've never seen it.
It's so bad. It just throws in every horror cliche imaginable that it almost becomes farcical. It's brilliant. And those Resident Evil films, first film, pretty solid.
Yeah, fair enough.
Pretty solid. And then, it was obviously just Paul P.W. Anderson, not to be confused with the master director, Paul Thomas Anderson, who apparently once took so much cocaine with Quentin Tarantino that Fiona Apple dumped Paul Thomas Anderson. And the next day she said, watching Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin Tarantino talk about films until 6 a.m. on cocaine made me never want to see either of them again, and I quit cocaine that very day. You Google this. This is a real
amazing.
story. It was so traumatic, and every time I hear that anecdote, I think about certain things. I would say about the nature of those directors, and potentially myself at times. However, back to whatever tangent I deviated from. Survival horror.
Yeah, so Shattered Memories.
Shattered Memories.
So bad it's good. Then you went on to...
Shattered Memories is a good crack. That's the Wii game. No, it's Silent Hill Revelations shite film. But the thing is, the pants ones are hilarious, and the good ones like the Last of Us TV show. It's irregardless of the things that they've improved upon the source material and somewhat lessened from the source material. It's a pretty solid adaptation, and it's feels even Stephen King like in its it almost feels like if to an extent it feels like The Stand, like the first TV series in the 90s. I just enjoy that sort of like almost Walking Dead-esque like anthology of human destruction and rebuilding civilization. It's there's something very Stephen King-esque, and without going off on too much of a tangent because it's my nature, J.K. Rowling, George R. R. Martin and Stephen King are all neurodivergent, and they are creating a culture war online because they don't want to finish their books because it's easier just to tweet and create drama than finish their books. That's exactly what they're doing.
Is that what George R. R. Martin's doing?
He sure is. He's doing all his blogs and he's doing his stuff because he's got the ADHD. He's neurodivergent, and I don't know what it is predominantly, but he has the ADHD, so he's just putting off his books because it's he doesn't have the dopamine, and he's got all this stress and it's cortisol to finish all these books. So he's trying to get dopamine from other sources. J.K. Rowling, same thing. She fucking respect her as a writer. I mean, I think it goes without saying, even to her most staunch advocates would say, "What the fuck are you doing on Twitter, JK?
Take your finger off the button."
You are so past that point of any. You were dying on this hill that you've made for yourself. I was at the Edinburgh Fringe a few years ago, and I saw 2 years ago, Graham Linehan standing in a box shouting at people.
You did.
And I went up and I spoke to him about his politics, and not in an aggressive way, in a purely academic way about neurology and about politics and it did not go well.
No.
I would say that regardless of how much I would think he's one of the greatest comedy writers of all time, he is dissipated down the dopamine hit of social media.
It's become unbearable online. It's horrible to see. I can't believe you were at the gig when he was they cancelled his thing on the inside, so he went and stood on a box on the outside.
I didn't. It wasn't even a gig. It was just outside.
Well,
no. What do you call it? Like Market Garden Street, or no? What do you call it? It's like
the bit there, the square bit.
Yeah, like it's you're going down the big hilly bit, and it's towards the God, what is it?
Yeah.
But it was just So I was going to my gig and singing on I had to go to my little PBH venue. Richard Gadd, so hilariously, illustrated in Baby Reindeer those rooms, and I fucking love PBH. I've made a documentary on Peter Buckley Hill. I also recognise they do just give you a construction site that don't have any toilets, and will have certain floors that if you walk on them, like panels of the floor that will drop you to your death, like Nightmare, the TV show.
But that's part of the fun.
It is part of the fun if you survive it. Is
that the one where they wore the big helmet?
Yeah, that's what a PBH venue is like. But I do love it, and I think what they are doing is a moral good. They are the 100%. They are the socialist. They are the. Have you ever played Red Alert 3 before?
Red Alert 3. So, hold on. Command and Conquer. 2 is Yuri's Revenge. Mm-hmm. What was 3?
So 3 starred Tim Curry as the Stalinist dictator of the Soviet Union. And they went back in time and they shot Einstein in order to prevent the Allies from having nuclear weapons. So they returned to the present day.
Yeah.
And what they found was that this had created a ripple effect where the Empire of Japan, the Empire of the Rising Sun, had risen. So now the Soviet Union had to contend with the West and the East.
Oh no.
However, if you play on the Allies side, you will defeat the Soviet Union, and Tim Curry, who is just having the time of his life eating the scenery as this character, as he is forlorn with the collapse of Soviet ideals, he says the following:
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Spice!
And that is PBH in a nutshell.
Snorted. I didn't expect that.
Have to take a short break.
Oh my god. Oh, sorry, you got me. Whew. I didn't think we'd be talking about Command and Conquer 3 and then suddenly we'd have Tim Curry. You're good at impressions.
Oh, thank you, yes.
Yeah.
I am a walking impression. That's what 37 years of masking does to you. Jim Carrey. Light.
What's he got?
ADHD. I've said this. I have a deep understanding of the human condition. He talks about in interviews, he says, I've got depression. I always feel there's no real Jim Carrey. And everyone's like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I'm like, it's ADHD, he's masking, he's dying, and no one believes me. I'm just the boy who cried wolf, or the boy who cried autism. And you know, it's just it. All these actors, they talk about in their biographies, and everyone's like, well, they're the way they are. Oh, well, they're the other way. It's like, it's neurology. But I, you know, one day my genius will be appreciated.
Well, look, you're doing what you can, right? You're getting the message out there.
The only way I'm ever going to have any meaningful impact on the world is if I do things that increase my social position enough that people actually take me seriously. If I was to make all these smart investments by investing in Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then suddenly become a millionaire, and then invest it all into comedy and start some sort of club and some sort of brand, then everything I'm saying will make sense and it will have validity. It'll have achieved some sort of currency. It will be the Bitcoin of knowledge. But because I'm just some bum with a huge loan they had to take out to save their dog, I am but just a jabbering idiot. I am the Diogenes of the current age, with Alexander the Great asking, oh, you could do my gig at some point in the future. I'll have to look at my diary.
Your plan for world domination is to invest in the BRICS countries, hope that they go to the moon, so you can open a comedy club.
Yeah, no, it's great. What you do is you see what China's doing in Africa, get a piece of that. Yes. Get a piece of that. No, these developing, they're like, look with the minerals are.
Yeah,
right?
Follow the minerals.
Follow the minerals, you know? I mean, like all these you know, southern African countries, that they're rife for exploitation. France has got the north, but the Chinese have the south, and all you've got to do, I mean, I know it's Chinese.
You think they'll let you in?
No, you don't have to be let in. You just can invest. You know, just jump on eToro and invest in these Chinese companies, and then see what you can get off the percentage. You know, it's easy becoming a millionaire if you give a fuck. But you know, I don't know if I necessarily want to contribute to human misery to make a point.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I wouldn't contribute to human misery to make a point. It's not worth it. There's a lot of human misery, and there's a lot of points. You could always contribute to something else.
Like comedy.
Like comedy, which sometimes does contribute to human misery. Let me check if we've got enough time on this recorder. Oh my god. Wait. Okay. There's 30 seconds. No, I thought for a second there was 30 seconds left on the card. There's 30 minutes recording time left on that SD card.
Okay.
So that's how much longer we've got, apparently. I should have deleted more files before I started recording.
Oh, it's alright. I feel like if we go on too much longer, it's going to be monolithic, you know. So this could be the point where we start coming to some sort of thesis statement, you know, because it is...
Well, I hope it's more like a thesis conclusion, because if we're only just stating it at the beginning, then we've got the whole 3 body paragraphs here, which might be more than 3, actually, having looked back. Well, it seems to me your thesis statement is everyone has ADHD. No, I'm only joking. British actors have ASD. American actors have ADHD. Almost all celebrities are neurodivergent. There are predators in comedy, who you are one of.
I'm not one of the predators. I had one long-term relationship, and I kind of fucked it a bit by not taking the neurodiversity that seriously. That would be but there was
It got in the way.
I mean, it was a little bit, So I think that's been the whole kind of like. You get your heart broken, and you do 2 things about it. You either disappear further down the rabbit hole, or you try to slowly claw your way out of that rabbit hole into a completely different rabbit hole. As some of the conclusions today have proven.
It's rabbit holes all the way down.
It is that meme from is it Always Sunny with the guy pointing at the board with all the conclusions?
Yeah, Charlie.
It's that. So it's a different rabbit hole completely, but. That heartache does propel you onto certain things. You just got to ride that. It's like when you just feel the need to clean your kitchen. You just got to ride that high to its natural conclusion. And if things work out, that's great. And if they don't, you don't have to think about it.
Right. In this analogy, what's the clean kitchen? Is that a clean slate of mental health, or is that a brand new relationship?
Well, it's both mental health and it's the influence you'll have over the hearts and minds of society. So whether it's a good, that's good. Whether it's a bad, you're not going to be alive to feel the results of it, are you? Just push it down. Like, when you've got like a bunch of crap and you just like hide it underneath your bed.
Yes.
Just do that. That's what millennials and the boomers did to us. With the old housing crisis and all that, and the rents and whatnot. I mean, it's the one investment you can always be sure of, is property. Everything else is just fun and giggles. But if you put it in property, it'll accrue in value. It's the one market that'll never crash, except for with the occasional times it
that
does.
And Bitcoin, yeah. But in all seriousness, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you were a procrastinator before, but I've heard from other people who take Vyvanse and similar things that their procrastination suddenly doesn't disappear, but is greatly lessened. I am a massive procrastinator. I'm curious. Have you noticed any impact on that?
Yes. So what I would say is that before Vyvanse, my focus was all over the place. So if I was at my job as a videographer of all things, I would be watching, say, a Netflix video while I was doing video editing. And I would have that sort of the excitement and the dopamine from watching that TV show would help me do the boring dog's body work. Mm-hmm. And now the way I procrastinate is I'll have something to do, like some job, or I'll have money to make, and let's just say I'll open a book, or I'll start reading something, or I'll start writing something, and I'll spend the next 4 hours just writing it. Right. And that's the procrastination. So the focus is so much better, but the procrastination is equally.
It's still there. It's just channeled more directly.
So yeah, you just focus. What you'll find is you just focus on things so much more. So because you've never really been able to focus, because the only way I can describe having pre-diagnosis ADHD is you're in a nightclub and you're trying to have a conversation. That's it. Everything is so loud, and there are 2 factors to that. There's one, if you have neurodiversity, if it's ASD, ASG, you have an understimulated vagus nerve, which is just behind the ear, connects to the eyes, and then connects to the digestive system, which is why a lot of people with ASD and ADHD and neurodiversities in general have terrible gastric problems. Also, there are problems with the different. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing.
I do.
So, in conclusion, no. So, this is why you bring on someone with ADHD who's talking about procrastination and keeps getting procrastinated by their own thoughts.
I want to ask you about the vagus nerve, though, and we'll come back to what you were saying, because I've heard about this, but I thought it was something where, like, when you splash water on your face, it activates it, stimulates it.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I'm agreeing because I'm agreeable, and I have no idea, but it makes sense because it's around that general ballpark.
And what does it do?
I don't know. I just know
fine.
it goes to your eyes, it's in your ears, it goes down to your brain, and it regulates stress and cortisol.
Okay.
So, for instance, if for people with ASD, if they hear if they're in a really noisy environment, they might shit themselves. They'll have diarrhea for the next few days.
Right.
That's because of stress. That's why. I had a friend called Gemma Robertson who spoke to today. He said that she was getting earrings, and the earring doctor put some relaxant in her ears, and she felt the most relaxed she ever has because it relaxed the vagus nerve. If you have OCD, ADHD, you will have an unstimulated vagus nerve, which can lead to dry eye syndrome, PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is absolutely horrible, which is suicidal PMSing. There's another way to describe it.
Oh God, that sounds bad.
And then there's IBD. So it's all connected around this ballpark. Neurodiversity. Also, if you have conditions, it's the gut-brain axis along the vagus nerve. It just creates a sort of bad feedback loop of one affecting the other. So you could have someone with, say, Crohn's disease who they have that Crohn's disease because they're neurodivergent, and then the Crohn's disease therefore makes the neurodiversity symptoms of it worse. So it's tackling one before you can tackle the other, and it's whatever the process is. ChatGPT is very helpful, but don't, for fuck's sake, just start playing Frankenstein on your brain. Make sure you have someone to talk to privately with the NHS, because you might end up knowing more than the doctor. It's a long, hard journey, but it's definitely worth it.
So maybe you could offer some people some advice out there who might be listening, who know, like you said, that the pathway to getting treatment on the NHS is incredibly long and potentially pointless or very difficult anyway. So would you have advice for someone out there who's listening thinking, I should go and get myself checked out? How would they do that? Obviously in the UK.
If you have ADHD and the doctors say, we're going to put you on a waiting list, I would say that seems like a cruel joke, considering the ADHD need to barrel on ahead. What I would recommend in that situation would be to talk to a doctor. Try and ask if you can talk to a doctor, not a specialist, but maybe someone in your general practice who they might know has ADHD or has spoken to ADHD. Not a specialist, because obviously that takes longer. But in my own clinic, there was a doctor who has ADHD, and she couldn't give me the assessment, but she could just talk to me about things like I said, I've started taking saffron to increase dopamine. I take the recommended dosage, which is 1 a day. I take L-tyrosine to increase dopamine. And I've started taking 5-HTP for serotonin. We had a big old chat. Turns out she does the exact same thing. She's undiagnosed ADHD because she herself, as a doctor, can't get the assessment because that's how long the waiting lists are.
God.
So that's one thing I'd recommend. Just try and find a doctor in your local clinic or a clinic who could talk to you more generally.
But who's familiar with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in terms of the assessment, it's also a difficult road because I myself was somewhat misdiagnosed because I think I was diagnosed correctly with ADHD. However, I tried to be as very upfront. I was very, very honest about everything. I wasn't masking. I wasn't pretending to be better at things I'm not. I had to be just very straightforward of how difficult things are. I just dropped all the bullshit, all the masking, and just really said to them, I find it so hard to just focus on anything. My mind's going everywhere all the time. I'm it's exhausting. I can't pay attention to conversations. I have to stress myself to focus on work, and I'm never lazy. I'm always burnt out all the time. I'm exhausted. Anxiety, depression. I'm just at my wit's end with this. All these things which I think are true, and I think women get it even worse because doctors still to this day are more likely to diagnose men than women, which is just awful. But it's just awful. I hate it. I hate hearing it. I hate hearing my friends talk about it. What I would recommend is you have to go private. Like you can't wait 3.5 years. It'll affect your relationships, your job. You have to go private, and I think. And
people who hear that, just to be clear, people who hear that have to go private might think, oh my God, that's going to rack up thousands and thousands of pounds. But that's not the case, is it? It can be the case if you're going for elective surgery or whatever, but this is not that, right?
Yeah, it is. It's I think there are ways, there are steps you can take. I think the initial diagnosis for me was £100, which, considering how life-changing it is I don't want to say value for money, because I actually do somewhat feel that you're still being taken advantage of. To be honest, this is something that in 20 years' time will be just, given that we don't completely fuck things up economically enough in order to fall back into a Great Depression, which I'm about at the moment. However, I would say the £800 is worth it, considering the value that will add to your life. So I did have to take out a bank loan, which I have invested in my own potential. I've recognised my own capacity. Not to say I wasn't great before, or I didn't have the intelligence. I've gone quite far in life. I've had a lot of successful corporate jobs. I've had long-term relationships that have lasted years. I'm driven, and I'm intelligent, but I feel that's the case for most people who are neurodivergent. Sometimes you just can't. Sometimes it's important not to push yourself to these extreme degrees. It's actually much more healthier to be lazy, and to not, if you have parents that can help you out, and you don't really want to force yourself into having conditions that, for instance, if you have conditions that have these, you have all these IBS and all IBD, and because that's your body having an inflammatory effect, and that can be so dangerous. So the stress is stress is a killer. It really is. So don't beat yourself up if people around you say, you're this and that, and you're lazy, and you're this. Because if you are someone who never push yourself, that's fine. You're protecting yourself. It's a good thing you're doing. And even if you are someone who, I would say, are doing drugs, and I would say if you're an addict, you need to seek help, because an addiction is bad, and it will kill you the same way stress will kill you. So that is something I don't think you should be beating yourself up if you smoke weed occasionally, or if you do things which I think eventually will be considered lesser. I do feel that you be very cognizant of symptoms like psychosis, and don't just start drugging yourself, because that can be really dangerous. But if you're someone who does things like ketamine or MDMA, and in a very controlled environment with people you feel safe around, and people who make you feel comfortable, because it can be very that's the heightened stress you have. Certain people who might be say drinking to an extent, then they might be very aggressive. You don't really want to be around those people when and also there are risks of psychosis that can be caused by just taking these things. But don't beat yourself up. What I would say, my ultimate aim is, don't shame yourself, because toxic shame and shame is the root cause of addiction. It's the same emotion. It's shame and pride are very interlinked, and so is addiction and shame. That there's not a single person who's an addict who doesn't also have a shame-bound personality. They're the same. There's so much written about the correlation between shame and addiction, and I think the only true antidote to shame is humility. It's the humility to recognize your limitations, and it almost feels a bit Christian to say it, but humility is the antidote to shame. It's not anything else. and don't let any other person who can't understand find support groups. There are lots of support groups for people with ADHD in London, meetup groups. You know, you might find people who you don't connect with, who don't understand you, who are different, who might have the exact same neurological conditions to you, but you will find people that just speak to you, and they speak to you in a way that makes you feel very relaxed and comfortable, and you'll know yourself. But you'll have dialogue, because dialogue isn't about understanding the other person or disagreeing with them. It's about understanding yourself. It's what I referred to earlier. It's this. It's the soul talking to itself. You know, you don't have to be understood by other people as long as you understand yourself, and you can only learn that by talking to other people. So when it comes to learning what your neurodiversity is, or even if you're not neurodiverse, there are things like, seeking private. That will help you understand yourself more, but you'll understand yourself more in dialogue. And I think just finding communities of people that just speak to you, they speak to your intuition, just speak to your gut instinct, and you will know yourself more, I think, by experiencing yourself, by talking to other people.
Amen. That was brilliant. Wow. There we go. I don't really think I should try and make some kind of cheap joke about any of that, quite frankly. I thought that was a really impassioned speech, PSA, whatever you want to call it. And hopefully someone listening to that thought, you know what, ding, 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 this is ticking some of my boxes, and it provides some help for them. The show's called The Bliss of the Abyss. It's a bit of both. And I think you've brought a perfect balance to it. So thank you very much for coming on the show, dude. This has been fantastic. Do you want to shout out places where people can find you, or do you want to just not?
Sure, yeah.
Go on, tell people.
Joe Murphy Comedy on Instagram. My account got deleted by hackers recently, so I've had to start again.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, it's alright, It was quite funny because they were contacting all my comedy friends and trying to get them to invest in crypto, which I would say, from some of the subjects I've spoken to on this podcast, maybe it's something I could potentially do. So they were wise to pick my account.
Get a Bitcoin or two.
So yeah, Joe Murphy Comedy is how you can follow me. I perform a lot at the Bill Murray in London, but I'll try and post more. Try and kickstart the old cognitive functioning to let people know where I'm gigging. Post a lot. I mean, I'm gonna start a TikTok soon. I've always been somewhat. I used to work in Canary Wharf, and I knew the marketing director of TikTok, and I didn't like their practices. But I think if you are a content creator and you can help people as addictive, and I think of TikTok as almost being like the sort of like the cigarette smoking of the 1920s in terms of encouraging, especially with kids. But they're I think I might start one soon and be almost like a neurodivergent comedy channel, but just some sketches and some PSAs, but try and speak from a good place, and if I monetize it, make sure that there is a healthy balance there where I feel like I'm putting it back into the community, because I know certain people could really do with diagnoses and they just can't afford it. So I think I would like to help in that regard, to help people get a diagnosis with, because the state of the NHS, and that's not to do with doctors, that's just to do with really poor management of national funds. I'd like to help in that capacity at some point. So follow me on Joe Murphy Comedy. That's me, and
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, dude. That was a brilliant episode, and I can't wait to put this out. So thanks once again for coming on, Joe.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please give us 5 stars and consider becoming a subscriber, and maybe even supporting us on Patreon. Really, really, really helps me continue making this show. If you haven't enjoyed it, then you can fuck off. Many, many thanks to Nils Hennis Steer for the amazing music and to Dave Fox for the cool artwork. Please keep coming back every week for more Bliss of the Abyss.
Message 1.